everything.
It's everything.
Welcome back to the Emajae Talks Everything podcast, where I talk politics, pop culture, and everything in between. I am Emajae, and I am back, okay? I am back like I never left. Hopefully y'all didn't miss me too much. Last week, I took a week off, and y'all had a video before that, like the week before. That's when we got into all of our stuff about relationships and dating and marriage and kids and all that fun stuff. So if you haven't watched that video, you need to go ahead, watch that video after you leave this one. Don't leave this one after. And yeah, so I took a break. The summer is wrapping up, y'all. So you know how that goes. It's birthdays, it's events, it's this and it's that. Work is busy. So it's a lot that's been going on, but I have been keeping my ear to the streets. I know what's been happening. We have a lot to talk about. I think today is gonna be a really fun topic that I wanna kind of get into and talk about. And when I actually announced my podcast, I took a lot of recommendations for things that people wanted to hear my opinions on. And today's topic, I actually got a lot of people saying that they wanted my opinion on this particular topic. So that's for a little bit later in the pod, but let's just go ahead and kick it off with everything that's happening in the news, okay? It's been a minute, so I'm so excited. Let's just get into it, right? First things first, on the sports tip, shout out to Shedeur Sanders, okay? First and foremost, I'm gonna give this man his flowers because he just made his NFL debut this past weekend. He plays for the Cleveland Browns. If you don't know, let me take a step back for those of you who are not into sports, okay? It's cool, you know, we listen and we don't judge over here. So Shedeur Sanders is the son of the legendary, iconic Deion Sanders. And Deion Sanders is known for being just an overall incredible athlete. He played in the NFL. He also played Major League Baseball for a bit. He was known as being flashy and braggadocious and unapologetically himself. His nickname was Showtime. Like, that is Deion Sanders, right? And so Deion Sanders has a few sons. He has a lot of kids, but he has some sons, two of which play football, both of them who has recently entered into the NFL. And if you don't know, Shedeur Sanders made headlines. He's always making headlines, but he made headlines with this past draft because people expected him to go in the first round, and he went in like the fifth round. And so people have their opinions. During that time, there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not, you know, he was supposed to be drafted in the fifth round or not. Personally, I feel like there was some level of like, we want to humble this kid who is unapologetically himself, who, you know, is coming in, doesn't need the NFL, isn't relying on the NFL. So I think Shedeur gets a lot of flack for just being the son of Deion Sanders and being unapologetic and just, you know, even though it doesn't seem like he's done anything to show that he's anything but humble, you know what I'm saying? So I root for him. I root for his brother Shiloh simply because they're doing their thing. And I just don't like when people, whether it be a system or another group of people, try to humble you because they feel like you should be, you know, any one kind of way. And so there was a lot on the line. He is like a fourth string for the Cleveland Browns, which is a team that I'm personally already a fan of, primarily because Myles Garrett is on the Cleveland Browns, and Myles Garrett is an Aggie. It's from Arlington, all of the things. And so, yeah, so I've already been, you know, a Cleveland Browns fan, but this year in particular, I'm like, okay, they picked him up. He's been a fourth round QB on the roster, but they let him play in this, you know, preseason game, and they won. I'm not saying that, you know, he is the next fill in the blank. You know, we don't know yet what he's going to do when, you know, it's not a preseason game or later down the line, but at least for now, I just wanted to take a quick second to say shout out to you, Shedeur Sanders, and shout out to anybody who is unapologetically themselves and does not let people or anything around them try to humble them. Like, I'm so over people trying to humble, especially Black children. I don't know what it's about. Actually, I do, and I could probably go into it, but I won't. I won't go into it this episode because there's so much more I want to talk about. But yeah, shout out to Shador. I will be watching. NFL season is coming up. Football season is coming up, and I am so excited. I am so excited. Shout out to my mama, because my mom and my mom is the reason why I think I love football so much. Just seeing a woman who like actually knows the game and cares about the game growing up, it just kind of, she passed that down to me and my sister. So we love sports over here, and I will definitely be keeping you guys updated on what's happening throughout the season. So shout out to Shador. Let's move on. All right, so next, I was going to talk about the havoc that has been happening in Texas regarding the Texas GOP and them essentially attempting to suppress Black and brown voters. If you have not heard, the Texas Republicans have been redistricted. I can never say that freaking word. They have been redistricting, or i.e. gerrymandering. They have been redrawing the state, the district lines, essentially so that it can impact the amount of representation in the votes and things of that nature. So if you don't know, I was gonna go into it, but the reason why I'm not is because, fingers crossed, I can get a special guest on the pod for us to talk a little bit about what the Republicans are attempting to do in suppressing the vote and what the Democrats have been doing to push back against it, right? And just at a high level, Democrats, they left. So there was a special legislative session that came together. The legislative session was supposed to be about the flood victims, that, the group of young women who passed away in the flood a few months ago. That was really supposed to be one of the primary keys of them hosting this legislative, special session or whatever. But instead, Republicans use it as a way to, again, suppress Black and brown voters ahead of these upcoming elections, right? And so it's messed up in so many different ways, and essentially, the Democrats only had one tool left, and that was to break quorum, right? So in order to vote on certain issues, there has to be a certain amount of people present. And when you break quorum, you don't show up, right? There's not enough people to meet that threshold, and the Democrats left. And the reason they left the state is, had they stayed within the state, then Governor Abbott would have been able to subpoena them, which is to, by order, force them to come and vote. But his subpoena power does not work outside of the state of Texas, so they left. They went to other cities like Chicago and other places that took care of them while they did what they had to do to make sure that there couldn't be a vote. I think that's a temporary solution because eventually you have to come home. Special sessions can be scheduled, over and over again, but they did what they had to do during that time, and I think it's very, very important because we are seeing in real time, like they're not even trying to hide it. We're seeing in real time the lengths these people will go to stay in power and to suppress what is and has been known as democracy. And so I talk about this all of the time, and in many of my episodes, I'm talking about what's at stake with this administration and how it's trickling down just across the country. It's very dangerous, but I'm looking to go more into that. Hopefully I can have some special guests on the pod and we can talk a little bit more. So I'm not gonna go too deep in that. I want to, though, go and talk about a topic that came up actually maybe like a week or two ago when I was, taking my little break. So there was a conversation that was prompted by one of my favorite artists. Her name is Ari Lennox. Ari Lennox, if you don't know, you should know. Go look up her music on Spotify. She's awesome. And she is a singer. She is a songwriter. She does all things. She has kind of like this neo modern Erykah Badu sound. I don't know. Go look her up. That's my girl. Shout out to Ari, but Ari Lennox, and let me pull up the receipts because that's how we operate over here. So Ari Lennox, she came out, and I don't know if she was doing an interview or I'm not exactly sure the context of like where this came from in terms of her saying this or speaking out about it, but she was talking about the legendary iconic show called Martin. And if you don't know what that show is, okay. Well, Martin is a show starring Martin Lawrence, and it's from the 90s. It's like up there with like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and A Different World and all of those different kinds of shows. It's a comedy, it was a sitcom, and a pretty funny show. Like Martin's just one of those shows that I feel like you can just turn on if you want to laugh, and it never really gets old. It's not one of my favorite old shows, but it's up there. It's a really good classic show, right? And so for anybody who's watched Martin, and for those of you who have not watched Martin, essentially Martin is married to, or in the show, right? His girlfriend and then eventually his wife, her name is Gina. And Gina is best friends with Pam. Gina is a light-skinned woman, Pam is a chocolate woman, okay? And kind of the ongoing like joke and dynamic between Martin and Pam on the show is they used to crack jokes on each other. Like it was like every single episode, dang near every scene, they would just crack jokes on each other. And it wasn't fun, it was in love. It's like, the best friend of, your person or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It was in love. However, Ari Lennox came out and made a comment about Martin that had people kind of up in arms. So I want to talk about it. She said, the only thing that teed me off about Martin is that how much he would go on about Pam. This is coming from a girl who, like, I love me a good joking A movie, but that was effed up. Like, I am not too woke or something, is what I am trying to say. I'll always feel a way about that. It's disrespectful to dark-skinned women. She's beautiful. And so when I heard this comment from Ari Lennox, who, like I said, is a dark-skinned woman, speaking about her perspective on a dark-skinned woman, how she was being treated or talked to, or the jokes that were being put out there on the show that she watched, I didn't think she was wrong at all. I completely agreed. I mean, I completely was like, okay, like I didn't realize that this was news. When I saw it, I was like, yeah, she's right, and I went about my day. Of course, the internet gets a hold of it, and instead of taking a moment to understand where Ari Lennox might have been coming from, taking a moment to say, you know what, maybe I don't relate because I'm not a dark-skinned woman. Maybe I'm not even a woman, or, people were attacking Ari Lennox. And that did not sit right with me at all, right? So then, Tashina Arnold, the legendary Tashina Arnold, who played Pam in Martin, she came out and she responded to Ari Lennox. So I want to play Tashina Arnold's response, and we'll talk about it.
Tashina Arnold is coming to Martin's defense after being accused of picking on Pam because she was dark-skinned. The actress says she was never insulted by the jokes because it was her job. Tashina also revealed there were some things written about Pam that Martin would refuse to say. The actress says, light-skinned and dark-skinned women go through similar things because either you're too dark or not dark enough. Tashina Arnold.
Okay, so let's talk about that just a bit. First of all, Tashina, you can still be offended by something even though it was your job. So even though these jokes were in the script, doesn't make it any less offensive of jokes, right? And I don't feel like everything that Martin said was rooted in colorism or ties back to colorism. I think that he made some jokes that really had nothing to do with her appearance, or anything of that nature. But we're not gonna sit here, for those of you who watch Martin, and pretend like a lot of the jokes that Martin made against Pam couldn't be tied back to some level of colorism, some of the things that he would say. And another thing that she had mentioned, what did she mention towards the end?
Dark or not dark.
You're either too dark or not dark enough. I do think that there's something to be said about that as well. But here's my major takeaways with the whole colorism conversation in TV, media, and things like that. I think, especially in the 90s, right? When people didn't have these kind of conversations, when people didn't have this kind of language to engage, I think colorism was way more insidious in terms of the way it showed up in the media that we consumed. So you always had the dark-skinned girl who was just the comic relief, right? Or who was there to be, joked on. And maybe for a lot of people, you don't recognize that as anything different because you are not a dark-skinned woman. However, I can tell you that as a darker skinned Black woman, I do recognize in different TV shows or different movies, the character that dark women are always poised to play. And a lot of time, they're not the lead characters. A lot of times, they're not the ones who are someone's romantic interest. A lot of times, they are there as someone's sidekick, as some type of comedic relief. And I think that people have to understand, if you can understand racism, right? If you can understand sexism, then you can understand colorism, because they all work within the same mix of ingredients, right? And the same way a white person might not understand that something that they said is racist because maybe they didn't intend for it to be racist, right? Is the same exact way you can make a colorist statement and it be colorist regardless of what your intentions are. And I think that's the point that people are missing. It's also not lost on me that when this Black woman, this darker skinned Black woman is speaking from her experience about how she feels like she's being treated, she's being ignored, which also speaks to how darker skinned Black women, Black women, but yes, darker skinned Black women are treated as well. Oftentimes ignored in a lot of sense. You know what I'm saying? And then if you speak up or you are a little bit too more vocal, then now you're having to deal with the fact that you're going to be even more seen as an angry Black woman. There's all of these different conditions and narratives that I think people are always balancing when it comes to topics of like colorism and racism. But what I really wish people would understand is racism and colorism, they go hand in hand. And when we're talking about intra-community, right? When we're talking about within the community of, because I'm Black, I'm going to speak on the Black community, people just act like they can't come to the realization of what people are talking about when they say that your statements are colorist or your jokes are colorist, but they completely understand racism. And I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance. I don't know what it is, but I always say, if you can understand racism and how it's a system and how it's a structure and how people can have the best intentions and still say some racist, then you understand colorism, right? Because the only difference is, at issue with racism is your actual race, and then colorism is just the tone of your race. And colorism exists across the board in all kinds of races, right? Across all kinds of racial backgrounds. But yeah, this whole conversation with Ari Lennox, when I saw her being attacked online, I was like, wow, like, we are really missing the plot. Take a second to listen to what this woman is saying, and maybe we can all learn, right? And with that being said, I also think that part of the issue is people feel like we are watching back shows that were created in like the 90s or the 80s, and we're watching it back with a 2025 lens. And so a lot of us know better and we're trying to do better. And so we call out these things that we see. And I think there's a group of people who are just frustrated because they're like, listen, that was created in the 90s. Let's not ruin every good thing that was created because now 20, 30 years later, we know better or we have the language. And I'm here for it. right? I'm here for it. Martin will be a classic show regardless, but we can also point out what we were seeing in the show, right? We can also point out that, yeah, that was what he was saying was colorist. Some of his jokes, I could see why it would make someone who was a darker skinned Black woman feel a certain kind of way as opposed to someone who was a fairer complexion, right? That doesn't mean that the show isn't good. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't watch Martin necessarily. That just means that I have critiques of a show that was created a long time ago, and I think that we should learn from it. You know? I really think it's that simple. Same thing happens with America's Next Top Model. Every 30 business days, people pop off on Tyra Banks because the girls from America's Next Top Model, they come out and they talk about all of these things, and there were photo shoots that were a little problematic and things like that. Listen, I think the criticism is fair. I think the criticism is fair. That doesn't take away from how absolutely legendary America's Next Top Model was. I was watching it religiously, okay? Every Wednesday night at 7, I was watching America's Next Top Model, okay? Judging them as if I was on the runway, okay? But now I can look back and say, that photo shoot, I can see why someone would consider that inconsiderate to their culture, right? I just wish people would take a little bit of time and instead of immediately going on the defense, understood that people all have different experiences, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be an attack on you. It can just be a critique of the art. And that is what art is there for, to critique, to learn, all of the things. So shout out to Ari and Lennox. I understood what you were saying. I understood where you were coming from. And I agree with you, sis. I agree. Martin definitely had some colorist jokes. It doesn't make it any less of a show, doesn't make it any less iconic, but it is what it is. The truth is the truth, okay? Okay, so honestly, that is as much as I want to talk about when it comes to things that are happening in the news, because I want to get to the main topic. So let's go ahead and introduce everything that is on my mind this week. Okay. So it's that time of year. The kids are going back to school, okay? Ooh, I do not miss those days. Amen. Amen that I do not have to go to nobody's school. I am done. I did my time, okay? But the kids, they're going back to school. The college students are headed back to campus, and for a lot of them, they are getting ready to do what's called a rush. And I am always on the side of TikTok where when it's rush time, I get all of the videos, I get all of the things, and I wanna make sure I stay on track because I have a lot to talk about. So rush TikTok is basically the videos that pop up around this time where National Panhellenic sororities, normally it's National Panhellenic sororities, are outside of their huge houses and they're doing their dances and whatever. And the girls who want to be in these sororities, they take us along and they show us their outfits and all of the things of how they're getting prepared for rush and all of these things, right? And I just find it freaking fascinating because it's just like, I don't know. I just find the videos are so creative. I mean, every single year it gets better and better and better, the quality of these videos. And because I understand that not everybody be on TikTok the way I am, I think we should watch a few of them so you get a little bit of context of what I'm talking about. So let's see. Let's start with. So you can see the girls are dancing in front of their house. Okay, so you get the point, right? These videos, they go viral every year around this time. I think it's the sororities' way of just like, getting their name out there, showing that girls who might be interested, like if you want to be in this sorority, we are the flyest house. And so it's just cool to see. And then also, like I said, you'll have different girls documenting their experience going through the rush process, what they're wearing, what they're taking in their bags with them, how it went. And then every year you get a little bit invested. Like, there are certain girls who kind of to like become like the star on TikTok of their rush process. And you know, you're rooting for them. You hope they get into the sorority that they want, all that kind of stuff. So because that has been all over my timeline, I thought that this was the perfect time to talk about being Greek, okay? Being Greek. I am not in a Panhellenic sorority.
Just hopping in to make a point of clarification, I say that I'm not in a Panhellenic sorority, and that's not completely accurate. What I meant was I'm not a part of a sorority that identifies as part of being a part of the National Panhellenic Conference. Now, I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which I go on to say as soon as I resume the video, but AKA is a part of the National Panhellenic Council. So just be aware that there is some overlap in the naming convention, but you have NPC and you have NPHC. And what I meant in that 1 second was I'm not in an organization that's part of NPC. So yeah, just to be clear.
I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which is a completely separate organization, which I'll get into in just a bit. But I want to go and start at the National Panhellenic situation, right? So these videos are going viral, like I said, pre-rush videos, and just for context, right? So National Panhellenic sororities are predominantly white sororities, okay? Which that might have been obvious from the video. That might have been obvious from the video, but they are predominantly white sororities, and the reason being is they've historically been white because they date back to the 1800s, right? The first NPC sorority was created like in the 1850s, pre-Emancipation Proclamation. So, you know, they were creating sororities before some of us were even free, okay? Before some of us even had all of our rights, okay? So just putting that out there for context as to why a lot of these particular sororities are historically white. And I only point that out because I think it does shape the lens in which I experience and engage with these rush videos when I see them. And that leads me to some of the things I wanted to talk about in relation to them. Specifically, I've made two observations, okay? The first thing is, even though these sororities are like 99.999% like white most of the time, I've noticed that a lot of these pre-rush videos, the music that they're playing is not giving that. Okay, the music that, like, let's go back. Let's go back, because maybe I'm tripping and maybe you can tell me, but like, I mean, they're getting it. They getting it. Okay, they getting it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like, okay, that's the video you chose. Okay, and then we have like the Bob. This one's so cute.
So they calling you Bob. Stop playing and you know that I'm known for the Bob.
Okay, that's so cute. But like Nicki Minaj, like I just feel like so much of the music that is being used behind these rush videos are very like rooted in like classic hip hop rap, like very much Black culturally related type music. And it's such this like weird thing to see like all of these white girls, I'm sorry, you know, and yeah, all of these white girls dancing to this, and it's like, okay, like it doesn't feel like it goes, but okay, y'all are getting it. That's my first observation. No, I ain't gonna, we gotta move on. The second thing that I wanna talk about is, you know, something that I feel like I can't have this conversation and I can't talk about the National Panhellenic, you know, sororities without having this conversation, just because it comes up every single year around this time. And here it is. Every single year, one of the girls who is, you know, on my feed or topic of discussion on this side of TikTok, it's always one or two Black girls who are looking to rush. And a conversation every single year comes up, and I see people asking the Black girl, why are you joining that sorority? Are you good? Are you okay? Like dogging these Black girls, okay? Because they wanna be in these basically all white sororities, okay? And I figured that, did I just hit my mic? I'm sorry. I figured that because I already know that the conversation is coming on TikTok, then we might as well just have the conversation here. And this is what I think about it, okay? Number one, I think that those are obvious questions, okay? I wanna start there. I think it's an obvious question to wonder why a Black girl would want to be in a sorority with, like a sorority that is made up primarily of white girls. I think that's a fair, curious question to ask. I think it's fair to ask, why would she choose to be in a sorority that maybe have like some less than stellar history in terms of political beliefs and backgrounds, right? I think that those are fair questions. I do. Trust me, I do. However, big however, I'm ready for people to let Black people, especially Black women, live their life without being investigated as to every decision that they make, okay? First things first, Black people, they're not a monolith. They're not a monolith, okay? There could very well be a Black girl somewhere who she really does feel like she identifies more with the young ladies who are a part of these sororities. And I think that that's fine, given that she recognizes that she's Black and given that she, isn't struggling with her identity as a Black woman. I think it's completely fine to feel like you have more in common at this school with, X amount of girls who happen to be rushing this sorority or who might be in this sorority, right? I think because sororities are about sisterhood and fraternities are about brotherhood, it's a little bit deeper than just like, oh, these are my friends. And so if she truly doesn't feel comfortable over here, but she feels comfortable over there, then I think that we should support her as someone who is still a Black woman and just appreciate that, okay, that's where she wants to be. But I don't see how it's beneficial or helpful to ridicule a Black girl who wants to rush in, a predominantly white sorority. I don't see how that is gonna make her any more closer to wanting to identify with the community, the Black community. You know what I'm saying? Black people are not a monolith. People are able to experience life in different ways. And you don't know what that young lady is navigating. I think it's very possible that there might be some identity issues sometimes when these Black girls are deciding to join these white sororities, Sometimes maybe they, are struggling with their Blackness or their Black identity, especially if they go to predominantly white institutions, right? We seem to lose grace for people when we forget all of the, aspects and factors that can be at play. Plenty of people are trying to fit in. Plenty of people are trying to find their place, especially when you are a freshman or a sophomore, as many as these girls are. A lot of these girls, they're just now graduating high school. They're just 18 years old. And oftentimes that's the age where you are really reconciling and coming into who you are as a human being, as a person, as an adult. And so I think we have to give grace sometimes to these young ladies who might see themselves more so in these white sororities. I think that we need to stop passing so much judgment because at the end of the day, you don't know, right? It's possible that she might be having these identity issues, but it's also possible that maybe she just grew up around a bunch of white people. Maybe she just grew up around a bunch of white people and that's the community that she feels more comfortable in because that's the community that she's been around. Who knows? But I think you have to give people grace, especially when you do not know these people. And I'm tired of seeing people get online bashing young Black girls who choose to rush these sororities. Again, I think that the questions are fair. I think it is natural to be curious about, you know, how are you wanting to be so bonded and within a sisterhood of people who don't look like you? But I also think it's fair to understand that someone doesn't have to look like you for you to relate to them, you know? And that's the reality. There are so many different things that connect us besides race. Now, race is obviously a huge factor. Race, because of the society that we live in and the way we built our society, will always impact the lens in which we see and live. However, when you forget that there are many different ways that people can connect, then you really put people in a box. And I think it's about time that we stop putting people in a box, especially young Black girls who are just figuring it out. So this year, when I see one of the Black girlies and she's rushing and she's doing her thing, I'm cheering for her, because what I want for her more than anything is for her to feel confident in the skin that she's in. I want her to feel confident in any house that she tries to rush into or whatever. I'm rooting for everybody Black. Always. I don't have to ask you, you know what I'm saying? I might check on you. They treat you right, you know what I'm saying? Like, I might do that, but I'm supporting you nonetheless, because at the end of the day, it is your choice, the sorority, the fraternity that you enter into. And with that being said, I am going to transition to the National Panhellenic Council, which makes up what is referred to as the Divine Nine. And the Divine Nine is comprised of 9 organizations, fraternities, and sororities that are historically Black. And Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the sorority that I am a part of, is the first historically Black sorority that was founded January 15th, 1908 on the campus of Howard University. And I bring up, my organization, and I'm not gonna go too much into my organization specifically. Everything you need to know is on the website. But I'm not gonna go into my organization more specifically, but I just bring it up because I think options are great. So personally, I knew that I wanted to be an AKA because when I was younger, I had so many great role models who were AKAs. One of my favorite teachers growing up, Miss Burrell, she was an AKA. She used to have all her pink and green stuff around our classroom, and I was so obsessed with her and just in general. And I remember when I was in high school and I talked to my mom about possibly joining a sorority one day, she was like, okay, well, before you make that kind of decision, you should go research them. And growing up, when I was a child, every summer, my sister and I, we would have to do essays. Like, we had homework during the summer, like we were always doing projects or something, keeping our minds busy. And one of my essays for the summer was looking into all of the sororities. And I already pretty much knew that I wanted to be an AKA, but then after I looked up every single organization, I found that that was the one that was most aligned to myself. And so eventually that was the one that I joined. And I bring that up because while you do have predominantly white sororities and fraternities, the historically Black fraternities and sororities were literally created not just out of this desire for being around like-minded individuals, but it really is the center of the civil rights movement and Black racial progress in our community. You can't talk about these movements and Black progress without talking about the Divine Nine, without talking about key players within the Divine Nine. Shout out to MLK, shout out to Kamala Harris, and so many others from beginning to end. And that's the legacy that I wanted to be a part of, right? That is the legacy that I wanted to align myself with, because those were the values and ideas that I already had as an individual. And so I say that to say, whether you want to be in a predominantly white sorority, black sorority, there are other fraternities and sororities, there's something for everyone. And I just think it's important for us to kind of start from that premise. And with that being said, I want to just generally talk about Greekdom and questions that I feel like I've gotten a lot about, you know, joining a fraternity, a sorority, and just all of the things that come along with it. I just kind of want to do that in this video, and perhaps I'll talk about this again one day, but I'm just going to go through some of the main like questions that I've gotten over the years, and specifically some of the topics that people have requested that I talk about when it comes to being Greek. Okay, so the first thing: should you join an organization? Should you join a fraternity, or should you join a sorority? The first question or the first thing that I always tell someone when they ask me that question is, have you done your research? Okay, have you done your research? Because what I find is, especially with, you know, the divine nine, right? We are fly, okay? People love the parties, people love the strolling, people love all of the fun stuff that comes along with being Greek. And it is extremely fun. I'm not even gonna sit here and pretend like it's not, because it is, right? However, the first thing that you have to understand is these organizations are a business. And as I said previously, at least speaking for the ones that I interact with the most, with my organization and others, these organizations are fundamentally about community service, giving back to the initiatives that we have and that we stand on, okay? So if you are getting into this for the wrong reasons, you ain't gotta tell me, you ain't gotta tell the next person, but I hope that you're being honest with yourself, because once you get into the organization, it is work. It is work, okay? You are going to have to plan events. You are going to have to show up to community service. You might be at that party until 3 o'clock that next, you know, the next morning, and have to get up for community service at 7 o'clock, you know? And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to do the work, then listen, it's not for you. It's not for you. But you need to do the research so that you get a sense of, you know, what kind of presence the organizations that you want to be involved in, what kind of presence do they have on campus, right? Are they active, like super active in the community? You know, do they, you know, have initiatives that you align with, that you are passionate about? Those are the first few things that you want to make sure that you're thinking through. Don't just join an organization because your friend joined it or because your mom was in it. I don't believe in that at all. I'm a whole AKA, and I'm telling you right now, if my daughter came to me and was like, I don't want to be in this organization, I might cry in private, okay? In private. However, if her heart is not in it and she doesn't feel aligned, then it's not for her. And I feel like that across the board, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to do your research. You want to get a sense of what do they stand for? You know, what kind of community service events do they do? Do research around your campus in terms of what kind of people are, you know, on this campus in that organization. Are these people friendly? Are these people kind? Are these people smart? Are these people like good people? Or do they seem to be the bullies? Do they seem to not be on their stuff? Like when I say research, I mean all encompassing research, okay? The second thing I want you to ask yourself is, do you already have a solid sense of who you are? Or do you think that putting on some letters is going to raise your, you know, social status, or, you know, basically what is your why? You know, why do you want to be a part of this organization, and what do you think that you have to contribute to the organization? I always say that I bring Emajae to my organization. I had a sense of self. I was already established on campus as Emajae. People knew who I was. They knew what I stood for and what I cared about and how I carried myself and all of the things. And then I joined my organization and I brought my characteristics and my strengths to my organization. I didn't just take from it, okay? That is the mentality you should have. I really, really wish that people would take a bit of time to make sure that you have a full sense of who you are as an individual. I was Emajae, the AKA. Not the AKA who happens to be Emajae, okay? And even then, I wasn't even just Emajae, the AKA. I was Emajae who happened to be an AKA and who also happened to be all of these other things because my organization is a part of me, but it's not all of me. And you can really, really get lost in the sauce if you are using these organizations to make you into somebody that you're already not. That's really not how it works. It's really not. I think most people will tell you that, and what's the nicest way to put this? What's the nicest way to... If you're a lame before the letters, you're gonna be a lame after the letters, okay? That's the only way I can. If you are, not well liked before letters, you're probably still not gonna be well liked after. If you were not on your ish before letters, you are not gonna be any better off after. It really is a magnifying glass of who you already are. So make sure that before you go in, that you are taking the time to really consider, who am I? What do I want? What do I like? What are my boundaries? All of these questions you should be asking yourself before you decide to attach yourself to an organization at all, okay? So those are some things that I think from the beginning you should just be thinking about when it comes to whether or not you should join an organization. Have you done your research? And have you checked in with yourself to make sure that you have a true sense of who you are before you join any type of organization? And also ask yourself your why. Is it because I'm trying to follow my friends? Is it because I'm trying to follow my mama? Because at the end of the day, when it comes time to pay that money, when it comes time to wake up after you've been out all night and you still have community service and you have a business meeting and you have an event and you have on top of school and everything else, you're the one who's gonna be responsible for all that. Not the friends, not the mama, not you, okay? So make sure you're asking yourself all of those questions. The next thing is, this conversation goes around a lot about whether or not joining sororities and fraternities is like paying for friends. Let me tell y'all something. If you were rejected from a fraternity or a sorority, I really need you to sit this conversation out. I really, really need you to sit this conversation out. And the reason being is I find that most of the people who are saying stuff like this, like, oh, you're paying for friendships, are people who, for whatever reason, wanted to be in an organization and it did not pan out, okay? And they are harboring some bitterness from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, okay? Being in a fraternity and being in a sorority is not about paying for friends, okay? I just feel like when people say that, I think to myself, if we were to apply that logic, or if we were to use that logic, it could be applied in so many different situations. Anytime that you spend money to hang out with people that you consider friends, you can use that same exact logic. When you go to the club, you're paying money to hang out with friends. You're paying money to meet different people. Does that mean you're paying for friends? No, it means that money is just a part of this thing that is bringing you together at this time. But people don't join sororities and fraternities because they are incapable of making friends outside of it. Like that's just not how that works. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, we're paying for friends, as if a lot of these people need to pay to make friends. That doesn't even make sense. And I feel like a lot of the times this logic just comes from like people who are feeling like just a little tiny bitter, you know what I'm saying? And it's just not that. At the end of the day, like I said before, people join sororities for many reasons, sororities and fraternities for many reasons. A lot of the time it's because your values align with the values of that sorority or fraternity. You care deeply and passionately about education or children or supporting the environment or whatever the case may be. And you want to be around a group of individuals who are like-minded, who have a mission to set out and to do these same things. And you get to, hang out with them and learn more about them and bond into this sisterhood that can last a lifetime. Does it cost money? Yes, because it takes money to run an organization. There are dues for a reason, because you go to conferences, because a lot of the times when you have events, it's the chapter's money that you're putting up in order to do X, Y, and Z. So this whole idea of, oh, people are spending money to be in these fraternities and sororities to make friends completely negates the reason why we're paying money, which is, again, to support the day-to-day things that it takes to run a chapter. And it completely negates the obvious fact that most of these people don't need to join a sorority or fraternity to have friends. The gap in logic when people say that to me is just so frustrating, because again, plenty of people join different types of groups that require dues, and no one judges them. If you've been to college, you know that there are plenty of organizations that you can join that are not fraternities or sororities. And guess what? In that first meeting, what do they tell you? Okay, so the dues are gonna be $20. The dues are gonna be $100. I was in so many organizations and there were dues for almost all of them. So we only say this when it applies to fraternities and sororities, but we don't say this when it applies to anything else. It's giving bitter, it's giving hater, it's giving, I just want to be able to say something because I wasn't a part of it. And I don't say that to be mean at all, because I don't think fraternities and sororities are even for everybody. I genuinely don't. I think it's perfectly fine to not even want to be a part of it. No problem. However, when people are just saying things that don't make sense, I think oftentimes that's just where it's coming from. But no, I definitely don't think it's about paying to make friends. Now, what I will say is the Houston Chronicle came out with this article not too long ago, and they were talking about how much these girls are paying to be successful during Rush. So a few years ago, there was this documentary. What did it come out on? I can't remember what it came out on, but it was a documentary and it was called Bama Rush. And it basically was a documentary, like an actual documentary based off of what had been happening on TikTok in terms of, following the girlies who were, doing the Rush process, blah, blah, blah. And I think that was the first time that I'd seen something about like girls who are paying women to teach them how to be successful in the Rush process. I do want to be clear about something. So historically Black sororities and fraternities, we don't rush. Part of that probably has to do with the fact that like most of the times we don't have these humongous houses on our campuses, and that's just not our process. If you want to know about the process of any of these organizations, you should go online and you should check out the website. But we don't rush. And so I don't have experience in the whole walking to house and doing all of the things that are part of this process. I only know from what I see and what I've read and all of those things. But I am under the impression that it's very, very difficult. It is very, very difficult. It's a lot. It's very intense. And you're really putting yourself out there to be ridiculed and judged and looked at. You know what I'm saying? Everything has to be perfect. I mean, these girls, they are invested, okay? And they are spending a lot of money because you gotta look the part. You have to have, the right shoes and the right, so to a certain degree, I get that, why people would think, okay, now you're doing too much. And I do personally feel like the girls who are getting these rush coaches, I think that's a little bit too far. And the reason why I think that's a little bit too far is because at the end of the day, when you are joining a sorority or fraternity, but I'll just speak about sororities, but when you are joining any of these organizations, you are saying that you want to enter into a brotherhood or a sisterhood of like-minded individuals who, you know, care about what you care about, who are aligned with what you are aligned with. If it's not genuine, if you have to go out of your way to pay someone to teach you how to fix your personality and to fix the way you dress, and to me, that just feels inauthentic to a certain degree. Now, maybe I don't know enough about what these coaches are doing, but from my understanding, that's essentially what they're doing. They're giving you the strategy, they're telling you how to talk, they're telling you, you know, how to do X, Y, and Z. And I just feel like no one should have to teach you how to be you. If you are being your authentic self and these girls are not vibing with that, I'm sure it hurts. But that's really a blessing in disguise, because if you are pretending to be something that you're not, and to the point where you have to pay someone to teach you how to be, then that means you're entering into this sisterhood on just a false premises, and you're gonna have to keep up that facade, and that just sounds exhausting. You know, it's like with any relationship, if you're not just real from the jump, you're signing yourself up to be exhausted, because who wants to pretend to be somebody that they're not for an extended period of time? You know what I'm saying? And then it's like you don't even gel with these girls in real life, so then when you get into the sorority, it's not even gonna really work because y'all really wasn't vibing. You was probably supposed to be better off on this sorority, but you wanted that one, so you paid the coach, and it's just, be authentic, you know? And I think that's also just another really, really good tip when it comes to being, you know, wanting to be great. Be yourself. You know, be yourself. It's all about being your authentic self and showing the organization what you can bring to it, right? If I had pretended to be anybody else other than Emajae, it wouldn't have worked, because at the end of the day, a part of what makes me so great and part of the strengths that I bring to my organization is the fact that I am me. And there ain't another me, and there's not another you. And so if you are pretending to be someone that you're not, you're really devaluing yourself, and you're taking away, in my opinion, the uniqueness that could really make you stand out and be great. And so if I had a daughter and my daughter said, hey, Ma, I wanna be in a sorority, I wanna be in X sorority, all right, girl, let's go, let's get it done. If my daughter says, Mom, can you pay for a rush coach or a coach, or no, I'm not. You need to be you. You need to keep it real, okay? So it is what it is. Now, taking kind of a pivot, right? So we talked all things about, like, you know, do you want to be in an organization, tips about organizations and all of this stuff. This part of the conversation might seem a little random, but I feel like we're talking about being Greek, and this topic was specifically requested from people who watch, and it's about denouncing organizations, okay? So for those of you who do not know, after you join an organization, right? So you're in the organization, you've done the paperwork, you've done whatever you need to do, you've rushed, whatever, you're in the organization, and you don't want to be in it anymore, okay? You want to leave the organization. Like, actually, I'm not a part of it anymore. You can denounce, and that means to separate, depart yourself away from the organization. And I think that we have seen that happen quite a bit over the past few years. Specifically speaking, from my perspective, I've seen that happen with women who are a part of denounce sororities or divine non-sororities quite recently. And oftentimes they are denouncing, or their denouncement is rooted in religion and some type of like religious awakening. And my understanding of what I'm hearing from these women is their relationship with God is in direct conflict with what they believe these organizations stand with or stand for, right? The idea that like you should not have any kind of idol. You should not be idolizing anyone but God. And so a lot of the women who I see are denouncing these organizations, that's really much where they're coming from. The idea of like, I can't be in this organization because I'm making it an idol, or I feel like there's a spiritual element attached to it that is conflicting with my religion. And so I want to talk about that a little bit, because first things first, nothing but respect for anyone who denounces, nothing but respect for anyone who feels like they have to separate themselves from an organization or a part of their identity that is now in conflict with where they are in their religious walk, okay, or their spiritual walk. I respect that. My thoughts, though, are how did your organization become so intertwined with your spirituality and God in the first place? That be my question. How did you joining a sorority get so intertwined with your relationship with God? How did you make that an idol? And my problem, though I respect anyone who denounces for the reasons I just mentioned, my problem is when I'm hearing these videos, it seems like what has happened is individuals have taken they have engaged with these sororities and fraternities or whatever in a weird way that was not required by the sorority or fraternity. No one asked you to make enter XYZ sorority your idol. Nobody asked you to replace God with this organization. So somewhere along the way, your engagement with this organization became something that it really was never supposed to be. And instead of fully reconciling why that may be, you make it about the organization. And see, that's where it gets a little tricky for me, right? Because it's one thing to say I have to denounce from this organization because I have taken it too far, because I put the organization in a position where I was making it an idol, where I was, letting it compete in my life with God and my spirituality. That to me is respectable and it's understandable. However, when you make it about the organization that never required that of you in the first place, I don't like seeing that, because I feel like it's not really representative of the reality of what happens. Now, I do think, back to what I said about Ari Lennox, I think that when someone makes a critique of something that you have an appreciation for, you do need to stop and you do need to listen. And so, even as someone who is a part of an organization and who does not plan to denounce anytime soon, I am actively listening to these people when I see these videos and when I see these women, and I am actively listening because I want to know how you got there. And I want to identify whether and in what ways, if any, the organizations are contributing to this situation that you find yourself in. Personally, however, I'm not hearing anything about how the organization is making you do any of that. I'm just hearing that along the way, this organization has become an idol in your life. As much as I love my organization, it has never, ever been an idol of mine, ever. As much as I love my organization, I have never, ever felt like it had anything to do with my spiritual journey in terms of negatively impacting it or being in conflict with God, that goes back, for me, it goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago. When someone asked me, should I join an organization? One of the first things I say is, like I just said earlier, do you have a good sense of who you are? Right? Because Emajae knows who she belongs to, okay? Emajae knows who she prays to. Emajae knows her God. Emajae knows her spiritual journey. So even though I might go into this organization, there is nothing that you can tell me about my God, about my spirituality, about my morals, about my character that's gonna change who I understand myself and my beliefs to be fundamentally. Because I know who I am fundamentally, and I'm only looking to join this organization because I feel like we're in alignment. If we're not even in alignment, then I got to go, you know? But that takes a true sense of self. You know what I'm saying? And I fear that people sometimes get, you know, confused because they go into these situations hoping that these organizations will create this version of them that they feel like they can't achieve without the organization. And so they become so intertwined into the organizations that it becomes their entire personality. And as someone who has been in an organization for nearly a decade at this point, I will say, one thing I can't stand is someone who makes being in a fraternity or sorority their entire personality. Like, it literally gives me the ick. Like, please don't be strolling up in Popeyes. I mean, not Popeyes. Up in Papados. Like, please don't be strolling. Like, we at the park. Like, it's just a nice, beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Why are you, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to be your entire personality. It should be a part of who you are because you're bringing something to it, just like it's giving you something. And the moment you're making it an idol, the moment you feel like it's forcing you to choose between it and God, you should take a second to evaluate what the heck is going on. But does that have something to do with the organization, or does that have to do with how you're positioning? Maybe it's both. I don't know, but I think that there really needs to start being a fuller conversation around what's happening when it comes to people who are denouncing. And, you know, like I said, much respect for people who feel like that's where they are with it. That's not my experience, which doesn't negate yours at all. Multiple things can be true at once. But what I want people watching this to take away is when you join these organizations, it's about who you are. You are joining the organization. And so you need to be in tune with your God, your religion, your spirituality, if that's your testimony, and walk that line regardless of what organization you join or not join. But if it's getting to a point where you feel like you are making that organization an idol, or you feel like you are having to choose between your God and the organization, I think the first thing you should do is check in with yourself. Yeah, I will say that. I will say that much. And I think that's all I want to say about Greekdom. I mean, this topic is so deep. It can go so many different ways. But I just want to, at a high level, since I know the girlies are headed back to school, they're doing all of the things, and I'm sure that plenty of people are trying to figure out, what do? I want to go Greek. I don't know if I should, or I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's paying for friendships, like people like to say. Listen, it's none of that, right? It's everything you want it to be and nothing that you don't. At the end of the day, it is what you make it. And that's why people have varied experiences. You ask 10 people about their experience being Greek, you'll probably get 10 different experiences and stories, and such is life, right? So I think that's it. If there are any questions about being Greek or anything like that, anybody watching and they have any other questions for me in terms of my experience being Greek or any other tips or, you know, context I can give about being Greek, I'd love to answer your questions. That's all that I had and all of the things that I had on my mind for the day. I'm so happy to be back. That week that I took off felt like forever, and I'm just so thankful to be here, to be chatting, and I can't wait until next week. I am looking forward to next week and the next few weeks to have some very exciting things on the way. So I hope you're staying tuned. If you have not, like this video, comment, share, do all of the things, and I'll talk to y'all soon.